lefanecha melech chai v'kayam shechezarta bi nishmati Bechemla Rabba emunatecha Modeh ani lefanecha Melech chai v'kayam Shechezarta bi nishmati Bechemla My soul has been returned to me as I wake with morning's light. A new day dawns, a page has turned. What a gift to be alive. Modeh ani lefanecha melech chai v'kayam shechezarta bi nishmati bechemla Rabbi emunatecha. Boker Tov, Shabbat Shalom. As is our custom, I'll try to wish a Shabbat Shalom to everyone that I can see on my screen. Rabbi Shtorny and Schatz might see different people so they can welcome the others. Shabbat Shalom to the Mishiks from San Diego, and to Elon, and to DJ Rick, and to Larry Rosenstein, and to Karen Cass. Karen, I thought you were gabbaying today. I don't know what you're doing. You're slacking off. You're supposed to be, telling me who's opening the ark. Shabbat Shalom to Ed, and to Rabbi Susan Lemley, and to Annette, and to Abe, and to Alan Broidy, and to Tzvi Resnick, and I think that's Larry and Diane Herman. And Shabbat Shalom to Howard Fredman, and to, who's that over there?
Jackie Honig.
Tamar Levin.
Barry Rosenblatt.
Shabbat Shalom to Barry, and to Henry Morgan, and to Joanna Sasson from Wantagh, New York. And, I remember that person's name, Susan. I remember the last name, if you read that email I sent to you on Friday. Came to me on a bike ride. Paul Steiner. Did you know him? We'll talk later. Yeah, of course you know him. Yes, because everyone in Wantagh knows him. All of you who are observing this, I'm sorry. This is what we'd be doing in real life in shul, and so we're trying to make this as real as possible.
That was awesome.
And
David Peretz.
Avi Peretz. Psh.
David Kaplinsky, welcome to town also.
And Judy and Joel.
Jonathan Swerdlow.
Terrific.
And Zoom viewer 1 and 2.
Yes.
I think that's us.
Oh, okay, great.
Yeah.
That's the best part.
It's and Shabbat
Shalom to you too, Cantor Chorney.
Shabbat Shalom. It's good to be here together.
Shabbat Shalom to me. No one wished me a Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom, Rabbi.
Thank you. We'll be here all week. Try. Don't forget to tip your waiters and waitresses. We are going to begin now that we have thanked the Holy One for keeping us alive, or making us alive again, as our tradition understands waking to be. We're going to move to Birkot HaShachar on page 103 in a second, but not yet. I'm going to ask you to rise. Before I ask you to rise, I want you to look at one bracha with me. Look, of course, there's not just one Siddur. So the order of the Siddurim, in case you're not familiar, every time we call pages, the first will be from Lev Shalom, the second will be from the Slim Shalom for Shabbat, and the third will be from Sim Shalom. So actually on top of 104 in the Lev Shalom, I don't know exactly where this blessing appears in the other books, but the Birkot HaShachar begins on 65 or 10. It's the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7th bracha. So right in the middle of these 13 blessings, we ask God, blessed are you, God, Eloheinu melech haolam, our ruler and of the universe, Matir, the one who permits, Asurim, those who are bound. Those are two very interesting roots that are being used here. Lahatir means to permit, it means to open, it means to untie. It also means to permit. It means to permit in Jewish law, and also means to release something or someone. And asur, aleph samech resh, means to be bound, to be tied up, to be connected and tethered, and it also means prohibited. If something is asur, you can't do it in Judaism. So in halachic language, those two roots have to do with what is permitted and what is prohibited. And in this blessing, we seem to be thanking God for either allowing us to, break out of our morning slumber, or it's a grander request that all those who feel bound be released. It's one of the more vague of the morning blessings. What Zokef Kifufim allow us to stand up straight, and removing sleep from my eyes is very specific. This is more of a grand and vague concept. There is a wonderful series of midrashim on this in the rabbinic literature that says that perhaps we should understand this blessing not as matir asurim, the one who releases the bound, but matir isurim, the one who permits that which is prohibited. And it fantasizes about a messianic era where all the things that we consider to be things you cannot do ritually, not ethically, will all of a sudden be permitted to us. Like every religious Jew aches, yearns on some level, and it's okay to be able to eat, chametz on Pesach, or treif whenever you want to, or all the things that trap us, give us meaning as a Jew, but trap us. There is some fantasy that in some realm that we can't fathom, they're going to be permitted to us again. Okay. With that in mind, I'm going to lead us in a brief meditative moment, because we're also still living through an era where we are quite bound and held back and anchored and tethered to rules and restrictions that are keeping us healthy, keeping us from one another in this moment, but allowing us hopefully to return to one another more quickly. And it's the right thing for society right now, but we're fantasizing about when they're going to be over. And so I think we can also say this blessing to be referring not only to those who feel literally bound for them to be released, but we're praying that God, through our society, one day permit that which we have been prohibited from doing. So, with that in mind, I want to invite you to close your eyes. And whether you're sitting alone or sitting next to someone, just try to draw a conceptual boundary in your mind around you so that you are kind of fully and comprehensively and coherently you, independent of anyone or anything else right now. It's just you. It's as if you've blocked out all other things and people and stimuli. You're existing right now in a powerful, intense cocoon in which your body and your soul are reunited, in which you're aware of your breathing and how luxurious an act it is, and in which, even though you've probably been awake for many hours right now, you might be experiencing a different kind of wakefulness in this moment. A wakefulness that's hard to sustain, but also critical for our spiritual and emotional well-being. Allow a wonderful heaviness to come over your body, even as your spirit feels light and effervescent and floating. And I want you to think right now of all the current COVID-based isurim upon us, the current prohibitions, the current things we cannot do, the current tethers holding us down, all for noble and good purposes. Just allow them to rush into your mind. Places you can't be, activities you can't do, people you can't see. What are your isurim right now? Our isurim. And see if you can use the tremendous power of your mind's eye and mind's mind to physically experience these isurim, even if they're not physical restrictions, as if each one is a strap attaching you to immobility. And you observe yourself from a distance, both accepting these straps, knowing the reason they exist, but also waiting, pining, struggling, hoping for their release. And just notice what it feels within those contradictions. To accept an isur while praying for the hatara, for the release. And now allow your mind to travel forward in time to some unknown moment or date where nearly immediately and miraculously and in such an unburdening way, the straps pop open, the chains release, your body is free, and you're blessing God and blessing one another for doing what it takes to be matir isurim. When we can throw off these shackles and finally enjoy what we deserve to be permitted to enjoy. And even with your eyes closed, you can say along with me, and then you can omit this when we rise for the whole list. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Haolam Matir Asurim. May we have the patience to hold on to ourselves and to one another until that moment comes. And may that moment come soon. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes. And we rise, and we turn in the Lev Shalem back a page. It might be on the same page in other Sidurim as we say Birkot HaShachar, skipping the one that we just said. We don't need to intone that bracha twice. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lasech vivina להבחין בין יום ובין לילה. Baruch atah Adonai melech haolam shasani betzalmo. Baruch atah Adonai melech haolam shasani ben chorin. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shasani Yisrael. Baruch atah Adonai melech haolam pokeach ivrim. Baruch atah Adonai melech haolam mabisha rumim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam zokef kefufim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech melech haolam roka aretz al hamayim. Baruch atah Adonai mecholam hamichin mitzadei gaver. Baruch atah Adonai mecholam she'asa li kol tzorki. Baruch atah Adonai mecholam ozer shel bigvura. Baruch atah Adonai mecholam v'teir shel b'tifara. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu mecholam hanotein la'ayev koach. Baruch atah mecholam avir shena me'inayim mami afapai. ותננו היום בכל יום לכן חסר רחמים ונחם ונכו רואינו ותגמלנו חסדים טובים. ברוך אתה אדוני גומל חסדים טובים לעמו ישראל. We're about to be on page 120 and 81 and 50. Just a note, in case any of you got the email earlier in the week announcing that our dear friend and colleague, Rabbi David Ingber, was going to be with us this week from New York, but didn't see the note on top of the Shabbat bulletin that unfortunately had to cancel and postpone that. Our dear friend, Rabbi David Ingber, who's a phenomenal religious leader and rabbi and friend, had to pull out at the last minute for personal reasons with great regret, because he was really looking forward to being with us, and we had a whole thing planned, and we are going to try to reschedule it. So you're stuck with just the three of us this Shabbat. One of the things he was going to be doing was going to be interweaving little kavanot, and we call them vortlach. The Yiddish word for word is vort. So vortlach are words, like divrei, words of Torah interspersed with the Psukei de Zimra. So we're going to linger on Psukei de Zimra today, as we sometimes have done. And he was also going to be giving a bit of a Dvar Torah after the Torah reading, and then he and I were going to engage in a talk back after that. So in lieu of that, Rabbi Chorny, Rabbi Schatz, and I are each going to give a short piece of Torah around the Torah portion. Later on, I'll speak as an introduction to the Torah reading. I think, and I don't remember when Rabbi Schatz or Rabbi Chorny are going to speak, but they're going to speak too later on. And we miss Rabbi Ingber, and we look forward to when he'll be able to join our community. To anyone who's operating the tech here, I'm usually able to see both the three of us in a screen and then my fellow congregants, and I can't see them and I miss them. So there, hello, fellow congregants. So now page 120, page 81, or page 50.
Eilecha
Adonai ekra ve'el Adonai et Chanan.
Eilecha
Adonai ekra ve'el Adonai et Chanan.
Shema Adonai,
Shema Adonai b'choneini. Adonai ozer li.
Shema Adonai,
Shema Adonai b'choneini. Adonai ozer li.
Lehem Isaac Chagavav Layidom, Adonai Elohai Lelamodeka.
New faces on my screen. Shabbat Shalom to Eitan Snyder and to the back racks and to Rabbi Elia Dorf and to Rebecca Menace and to Jeffrey Altman. Oh, Jishama B'yarei Yehuda. Oh, Bechutza Yerushalayim. He just got married. Oh, Sason V'Kol Simcha. Kol Chatan V'Kol Kala. And when Jeff's in a really good mood, he will tell you what he was wearing when he got married. I'll just leave that at that. And those are all the new faces that I see on the screen. Rabbi Chorny.
Let's do Mourner's
yes,
Kaddish
thank you.
first. Mourner's Kaddish can be found on pages 121, 82, or 52. Yit Gadal, V'yit Kadash, Shemei Rabbah.
Amen.
Ve'amad Divara Kirute, V'amlich Malchute, בחייכון וביומכון ובחיי דכל בית ישראל, בעגלה ובזמן קרי ואמרו
Amen. Yehi Shemei Rabba Mevorach Leolam Leomeo Maya.
יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא. ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי דקודשה
בריחו.
לעילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה, תושבחתה ונחמתה, דמירם בעלמה ואמרו
אמן.
יהי שלמה רבה מן שמיה, וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן.
Amen.
עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו
Amen. A few more Shabbat Shaloms to the Sunshine family and to the Abels family and to David Rose and to Myra Newman and to Jen Lowe. We're considering putting Anna Bakoach right in the middle of Psukei de Zimra just for you. We'll see. We'll see if we can handle that. And welcome to everyone who I am still not seeing, but I know that you're there. Rabbi Chorny.
Another vortlach before we ask you to rise. For Baruch She'amar, which in a few moments you can find on page 122 or 83 or 54. Some of you might wonder why it is that we talk about the Amidah when we get to it, the private one, as the whispered Amidah, not the silent Amidah. So I want to take a few moments now, not at the Amidah, but at Baruch She'amar, to talk about it. Baruch She'amar v'haya ha'olam. Blessed is the one who spoke and created the world. The world came into being. God created the world through speech and not through wondrous acts like the ones that we will tell the story of around the Seder table in just about a week and change. God spoke and created a world. Speech is a creative act in the imagination of Jews, of people of our rabbinic tradition. Speech creates. There is this impermeable barrier between what's in our mind and what we put out there in the world. The story in our tradition that tells it best and that gets preserved in the rabbinic imagination and in our canon together comes in the Talmud from the Hebrew Bible, from the Haftorah that you know from the first day of Rosh Hashanah, from the first book of Samuel, from the story of Hannah, who in a moment of trembling before God goes up to the priest Eli and prays for a child because she's barren. And Eli the priest accuses her of being a drunkard, and she says, "No, my Lord Adoni, I am not here drunk before you and before God. I'm praying, I'm whispering." And the rabbis use this as an example and say, this is how we should pray. We don't just keep prayer in our minds, we put it on our lips. Because the rabbis understand that by putting words out there in the world, we create things. We understand that when we put words out there in the world, it does things. For me, the understanding that there's a difference between what I think and what I put out in the world is powerful. It's powerful in the inverse because it gives me permission not to punish myself for sometimes having thoughts that are challenging, for sometimes having thoughts that I think are bad thoughts, for sometimes having thoughts that are tough thoughts. During that time, as Rabbi Kligfeld described, we are in a difficult time, in a challenging year, and sometimes I have thoughts that are tough thoughts, but I have a filter, and I have a choice, and I can create a world by taking those thoughts and putting those thoughts out and creating a world by turning those thoughts into the most beautiful words I can create, and then actions, and then more and more, and building with them. I have 2 young children, and I learned from the occupational therapist that one of them is working with just how powerful the stage they're in is as they're learning and grasping the idea of theory of mind. And that's exactly what I'm expressing to you. This idea that there is a permeable and impermeable barrier in each of our minds, in which the thoughts that are in our head are not the thoughts that are in somebody else's head. And there is a moment in each of our lives in which we come to grasp that. And our rabbinic tradition teaches us that about prayer. There are thoughts that are in our head, and we get the choice every moment to put them on our lips and put them out and create worlds with them or not. When God spoke, God created a world. When you speak, you create worlds. I invite you to rise if you wish, if you can. Page 122, 83, 54. Baruch Hu, Baruch Shemo, Baruch Hu, Baruch Shemo, Baruch Hu, Baruch Shemo, Baruch Hu, Baruch Shemo, Baruch Shemar ve'hayalam, Baruch Hu, Baruch Shemo, Baruch Hoseh ve'reishit, Baruch Homer ve'yoseh, Baruch Hu, Baruch Shemo, Baruch Hu, Baruch Shemo, Baruch Gozer Umekayem, Baruch Merachem Al Haaretz, Baruch Hu, Baruch Shemo, Baruch Hu, Baruch Shemo, Baruch Merachem Al Habriot, Baruch Mishalem Sachar Tov Lireya, Baruch Hu, Baruch Shemo, Baruch Hu, Baruch Shemo, Baruch Chai La'ad V'Kayam Lanetzach, Baruch Podeh Umatzil, Baruch Hu, Baruch Shemo, Baruch Hu, Baruch Shemo, Baruch Shemo. Yachid Cheolamim, Melech Meshubach Umfoar Adei Ad Shemo HaGadol, Baruch Atah Adonai, Melech Mehulam Atishbachot.
Amen. May be seated. Turn to 128, 88, or 62. For Psalm 34, we'll pick up in the acrostic at the line that begins with a mem. L'David b'shanatot ta'im l'ivnei melech v'yigasher v'yilach v'arachana b'cholet tamid tilato b'fi. Mi ha'ish chafetz chayim ohev yamim lirotov. Mi ha'ish chafetz chayim ohev yamim lirotov. Tov again. Mi ha'ish chafetz chayim ohev yamim lirotov. Mi ha'ish chafetz chayim ohev yamim lirotov. Netzor, netzor, leshoncha meira, usefatecha, midaber mir, masur meira, asetov, bakei shalom verod fehu. Netzor, netzor, leshoncha meira, usefatecha, midaber mir, masur meira, vasetov, bakei shalom verod fehu. Darkei Shalom Berotfehu. Any other tzaddikim? Timotate Rasha Ra'av Sonei Tzadik Yeshamu Poder and I never Shavadav V'lo Yashmu Kol Achosim Bo. We turn to page 132 or 92 or 72. Please rise for Hallel Hagadol. Hodu Ladonai Ki Tov Ki Le'olam Chasto 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 Hodu L'Le'olam Chasto. Shebishifleinu zacharlanu ki olam chasto vayifrakenu mitzarenu ki le'olam chasto noten lechem lachol basar ki olam chasto hodu le'el hashamayim ki le'olam chasto. May be seated 134 or
The Psalm for Shabbat.
it's around 94 and 75 in the other seated room. For some reason that exact one is not on my page. Psalm 92.
Midrashir leyom hashabbat.
Magadlu.
Marabu.
Hilufinu.
Malay shirakayim. We're not there yet. Tzadikatamar yifrach ke'erez balvanon yizkeh shetu bevet Adonai bechatzrot Eloheinu yafrichu od yenuvun beseva deshenim berananim yiyu lehayim ki hashar Adonai Suri velo avlata bo. Edotecha nemnu
Meyod levet chana v'kodesh Adonai leorech yamim Adonai leorech yamim One.
Make sure you have rights to that one before you sing it.
136, 96, or 81 for the Ashrei, and welcome and Shabbat Shalom to Amira, and welcome and Shabbat Shalom to someone else who I saw, but now I can't see who they are.
Adina Singer Franks.
Adina Singer Franks, yes.
Oh.
And welcome to anyone else who I can't see. Ashrei.
Ashrei shebitecha od hallelujah salah.
Ashrei shebitecha od hallelujah Hashem tevach
Am shadonai Elohav teilaledim.
Nevarech ya. Oh, me'ata v'yad olam, me'ata v'yad olam, hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. Next page or next psalm. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Adonai shomeret gerim yatom ve'almana ye'oded v'derech reshaim ye'aved yimloch Adonai le'olam Elohai Tzion ledor vador. Hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. Page 139, 99, or 86.
Hallelujah.
Hallelujah. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. Bameromim. Hallelujah. Chol malachav. Hallelujah. Kol tziva'av. Hallelujah. Shemesh ve'areyach. Hallelujah. Kol kochvei or. Hallelujah. Shmei hashamayim ve'amayim. Asher meyal hashamayim. Yeah, hallelujah. Shem Adonai Yutziva v'nirau v'yawa midein leyad leolam chok natan v'lo yavor. Yeah, hallelujah. Shem Adonai Yutziva v'nirau v'yawa midein leyad leolam chok natan v'lo yavor. Hallelujah. 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 We turn ahead to page 143 or page 102 or 92, and we rise as we sing the Song of the Sea.
Before we get to OZ, I was trying to read the faces of my colleagues to see if they were going to do something first. Before we sing OZ, I want to just have you focus for a moment on what these words actually mean. We sing them very often. OZ means my strength, vezimratia, and the song of God. And as Shefa Gold points out, and it's her tune that we sing, so it's beautiful that this is a translation that goes hand in hand with the way that we sing these words. She says that it's my strength and it's the song of God, but then balanced is where we will find salvation. There are many things in this past year that we've missed out on by not being in community, by not being together in this sanctuary. And one of the things that I so often hear people talk about, whether or not they're musicians, is music. Harmony, live music, playing music in an ensemble. And to me, even this morning, being able to sing in harmony with Rabbi Kligfeld and Cantor Chorney, it brings a sense of peace. It brings a tremendous joy that you just can't get on your own. And that brings strength. That brings strength in yourself. It gives me hope for what's to come in the future. It gives me hope for relationships to be able to come back and be normal, for ensembles of music to be able to play again together, and for our community to be able to fill these pews that I'm currently looking at empty, filled with your voices. And Psuke de Zimra is always, for me, this balance. Sometimes we walk into moments of prayer and we're just not feeling it. We woke up on the wrong side of the bed, or we're just ready to get to Kiddush. But when we sing, when we start to sing, something just wells up inside me that says, this is where you're supposed to be. This is the moment that you're supposed to be in. And all the more so when I get to sing with others. So when we sing Ozi Vezimratia, I hope that you're each able to think about the strength that you're bringing to this moment. Psuke de Zimra is supposed to be this warm-up, this wind-up to Shacharit. And we're almost done with Psuke, and though we will continue in harmony, the capsule of Psuke de Zimra will burst open into Shacharit, and hopefully will provide us with more strength and more songs of God. So as we sing this slowly, think about what you're bringing this morning as your strength, and also think about what you're bringing this morning that needs to be strengthened. And then use your song of God, use your voice, your breath, and balance those two things together to be able to move through the rest of Psuke de Zimra and into Shacharit. Ozi,
Ozi bezimratya, vayehi li lishua. Ozi bezimratya, vayehi li lishua. Ozi bezimratya, vayehi li lishua. Ozi bezimratya, vayehi li
Adonai
Imloch leolam lahed Adonai Imloch leolam lahed Ki l'Adonai Mlucha Moshe Bagoyim Alu Moshim B'Yar Tzion Lishpot Et Har Esav Vaytal Adonai Mlucha Vayadonai L'Melech HaKol Haaretz Bayom Hahu Yadonai Echad U'Shemo Echad. You may be seated. We're about to sing Nishmat, which is on page 145, 104, and 334. If you're a curious Jew, occasionally you have the following question in your mind when you open up a Siddur or a Haggadah, which is, what's it doing here? How did it get here? Right? Whatever one's understanding of the provenance of Torah, the Siddur was put together by men, for the most part, maybe for the all part, and it was cobbled together over time, and then it comes to us as mostly fixed. We are sometimes playful with it and adding and subtracting, but everything originally got there for some reason. And sometimes I remember being as a kid, open up the Haggadah and getting to the part of the Haggadah where we sing Nishmat and asking myself the question, how did it get here? What's the Nishmat from Shachri doing in the Haggadah? And the real question should be the reversed. What's the Nishmat of the Haggadah doing in Shachrit? Because the initial place in Jewish literature, rabbinic literature, where this paragraph is mentioned has nothing to do with Shabbat davening, and it's not in weekday davening, it's only Shabbat, but everything to do with the Seder. So in Masechet Pesachim, in the tractate of Talmud called Pesachim, on page 118, anyone who's still doing Daf Yomi just hit this about 5 or 6 days ago. I know that Stuart Tochner was excited to read this page. Nishmat is mentioned for the first time in rabbinic literature as a definition of a very strange two-word phrase in the Mishnah. In the Mishnah Pesachim, it says that over the third cup of wine, we're supposed to say Hallel, and also Birkat Shir, the blessing of song. And then the rabbis and the Talmud are trying to figure out, well, what is this blessing of song? Clearly it wasn't inherited by them as a very specific piece of liturgy. And Rabbi Yochanan says, what is Birkat Shir? What is the blessing of song? Nishmat. So somehow Rabbi Yochanan was aware of this paragraph or something connected to this paragraph, and he says, singing this fulfills your obligation in the Seder for this Birkat Shir, and that's why it appears in the Seder. That's talking material in the 2nd or 3rd century CE. It's not until the 9th century, 600 years later, is the first time we see this material in anyone's Siddur. The Siddur of Rav Amram Gaon, who is a Gaonic leader in the 9th century. If you open up his Siddur, you see it there. But Nishmat is put together in our Siddur as one piece of liturgy. It's really two. If you look, at least I'm only looking at Lev Shalem right now, 145, there's a paragraph break, as it were, after Lecha Levadcha Anachnu Odim, to you only do we offer thanksgiving, and then a little break, and then Ilu Finu Malay Shira Kayam. If only our mouths, Malay, were as filled, Shira, of praise for you, God, as the sea, and then a series of only ifs. Only if our tongues were as filled with joy like the innumerable waves, and our lips as filled with praise like the expanse of the heavens. Aspirations, wishing we could possibly come to the level of praise for the Holy One that the Holy One deserves. It's from a totally different part of rabbinic literature. In Masechet Brachot, Tractate Brachot, page 59b, Rabbi Yochanan says that this piece, the second piece, has nothing to do with the Seder. Same rabbi. It's actually one of the prayers you can do when you're praying for rain. right? Go back 1,800 years, the land of Israel. A drought could not be fixed with high-powered engineering. It can't be fixed with high-powered engineering now either, but we have a better understanding of how to create a reservoir, etc. And when the land of Israel went without rain, the Jews petitioned God with all sorts of different prayers. In fact, there's a whole tractate of Talmud called Ta'anit, meaning fast, which is specifically about, although it jumps into other topics, the fast that would be imposed in times of drought. And one of the prayers that was articulated by the Jews, according to Rabbi Yochanan, when rain didn't come, was this: as if we're buttering up God by saying, we know we don't have enough words of praise for you, and only perhaps if we did, we could communicate to you our need, our vulnerability, and you would send rain. And they were smushed together, these two suggestions by Rabbi Yochanan for different parts of the Jewish experience, to be the last thing that a Jew says in Psukei de Zimra on Shabbat morning. And if you synthesize them, which is not Rabbi Yochanan's intention, but some later arranger of the Siddur, what do you have? You have, on the one sense, a full-throttled attempt, Nishmat Kol Chai. May the breath of every living thing, and Kol Chai, may the breath of all of my livingness, all of my vitality, may all of it be focused towards the praise of the Holy One. That's part one. And then part two, inevitable and realistic insufficiency. Ilu finu. I don't have enough words to praise you, but I'm going to try. I don't have the ability to express everything that I need to express, and I'm going to try. So it's interesting for me that this synthesized prayer, right before we go into Shacharit, in some ways encapsulates all of our life experiences. An attempt, hopefully, to produce and to be present as fully as possible, and an awareness that so many of our tasks are Sisyphean. We never actually reach the end. There is an inevitable insufficiency which ought not inhibit our attempt to try the next time. So we will not be sufficient, my friends, in praising the creator of the universe this morning. But we're sure going to give it our all. Nishmat Kol Chai Tivarech et Shimcha Adonai Eloheinu Nishmat Kol Chai Tivarech et Shimcha Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Orer Yeshanim Hamekitz Nirdamim Hamesich Elmi Ilufinu Malay Shirakayam. Al Kene Varim Shepilagta Banu Baruch Shemash Nafachta V'Yapeinu. Mi yid melach umi yishvelach umi yaroch lach Galagado agibor v'yanura Elayon koneh shamayim ba'aretz Nalel chana shabechacha Unafa'er chana v'rechet shem kodshecha kamor LeDavid barchi nafshi et Adonai V'chol kravai et shem kodsho el b'tatzumot uzecha Hagadol bichvod shemecha Hagibor l'netzach v'yanora benorotecha Hamelech hayoshev al kisei ram v'nisa. And with Psukei de Zimra coming in at a crisp, brief 56 minutes, we now will move to Shachrit, though the world is a better world when Psukei de Zimra is given mostly an hour. And we turn to Shochen Ad, which can be found on page 147, 105, or 336.
Before Cantor Chorny begins, I just want to mention something that I've been thinking about all morning. When your clergy are leading services, very often we're in person, and so we're able to stand up from our seat and tell each other things. And over the past year, you've heard us give each other cues either out loud and in front of all of you, or through our breath. And one of the things that I noticed so much today was you know where we are, but you can't tell the way that we are looking at each other, that we're following one another's cues actually in the way that we are breathing, whether it's through how we're singing or if we're taking a breath to speak. And I, along with many other things that I hope don't change after we all come back together, that's one of the things that I think brings such calm and focus and serenity almost to singing and praying together, that we can actually feel each other's hearts and souls in the prayer, because we're trying to find things without words to be able to listen and be in tune with one another.
Yes, and sometimes my colleagues say, Adam, you're breathing too heavily into the microphone, so there's that too as well.
Well, that's also true, yeah. But you're doing great today.
I'm so glad. Shochen Ad. Be'efi shaharim Titalal udivrei tzadikim titbarach shochen ad marom v'kadosh shemo shochen ad marom v'kadosh shemo uvilshon hasidim tidroma kedoshim titkada shochen ad maharom v'kadosh shemo shochen ad maharom v'kadosh shemo
v'chaduranu tzadikim baronai l'shanim navati l'bevish v'makalot v'velot v'papitizan Shekin chovat kol yitzarim lefanach Adonai Eloheinu v'Elohei Avoteinu lehodot l'alav l'shabech l'va'er l'romem l'der l'varach l'alehu kales hokol divrei shiro v'tishbechot David ben Yishai avdecha mishichecha. You're invited to rise. Yishtabach shimcha la'ad malkeinu. Mirachot ve'hodot mi'ata v'yad olam baruch atah Adonai melech gadol b'tishbachot el hodot Adonai niflaot habocher b'shirei zimra melech chei holamim.
Amen.
We are going to move into the part of Shacharit that we do our best not to disrupt with page announcements. It's also the part of Shacharit that when we don't have a minyan, we skip the Devarim Shabikdusha, the things that require a minyan in person, with the exception of Mourner's Kaddish, of course, at the beginning of services. So together, we turn to the part just past Baruch Hu on pages 150, 107, 340. You're welcome to be seated through these blessings before and after the Shema, through the Shema and afterwards. And when we get to the bottom of page 158, 114, or 352, we'll gesture for you to rise in anticipation of the whispered Amidah. We're on 150, 107, 340. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam yotzer ar uvorei choshech osei shalom vorei et hakol yuducha v'yakol yishabechucha. In kirkach Adonai Eloheinu olam hazavin zlatacham halkeinu lecha yolam haba efes b'techa golenu limotam Mashiach v'yidum melecha Moshiachenu v'tlihat amitim
Dom hakol hamasim Baruch umvorach befi kol neshama Godlo betuvo malei olam dahatud puna sovevim oto hamid gae achayot hakodesh v'nedar bechavod al merkava zechuchut mishor lifnei chiso chesed v'rachamim lifnei chevodo. Tovim v'yarshim.
Try to change the key. No.
Kol tzeva marom tiferet ugedula srafim ve'ofanim v'chayot hakodesh
Leil Hasher shalat mikol hamasim. We worship you. Tiparach Moshino Shabbat Masei Yadecha B'Yamiri Har Shehasita Yifaru Chasela Tiparach Surim Malkin V'Kol V'Nabodei Kedushin כולם אהובים, כולם ברורים, כולם גיבורים, וכולם עושים בהמה, וביראת רצון קונם, וכולם פותחים את פיהם בקדושת תורה. בשירה וזמרה, ומברכים שבחים, ומפארים מעריצים, ומקדישים, וממליכים את שם האל, המלך הגדול הגיבור, והנורא הקדוש הוא. וכולם מקבלים עליהם מלכות שמיים זה מזה, ונותנים רשות זה לזה. להקדיש ליוצרם בנחת רוח בשפה ברורה, ובנימה קדושה, כולם כאחד עונים לאומרים ביראה, קדוש 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 אדוני צבאות מלך הארץ כבודו. והאופנים וחיות הקודש ברעש גדול מתנשאים לעומת שרפים לעומתם משבחים ואומרים ברוך כבוד אדוני ממקומו לברוך למתתנו למלך. אור חדש על ציון תאיר, ונזכה כולנו מהרה לאורו, ברוך אתה אדוני יוצר המאורות. אדוני אלוהינו חמד ולקיים את כל דברי תלמוד תורתך באהבה.
והאר עינינו בתורתך, בתורתך, ודבק ליבנו במצוותיך, במצוותיך. ויחל לבבינו לאהבה וליראה את שמך ולא נבוש לעולם ועד, ולא נבוש לעולם לעולם ועד.
לקרב תנו לשמך גדול סלע, באמת להודות לך ליחדך באהבה, ברוך אתה אדוני הבוחר בעמו ישראל באהבה, אל מלך נאמן שמע ישראל אדוני Adonai Elohechem emet. Lidor v'dor kayam, shmo kayam v'chisor, nachon malchuto b'emunato lad kayamet. Emet shatahu Adonai Eloheinu v'Elohei Avotenu, Malkeinu melech avoteinu, goaleinu goel avoteinu, yotzereinu tzor yeshuateinu, podenu matzilenu me'olam shemecha, ein Elohim zulatecha, Ezrat avoteinu atahu me'olam. Raham v'nisa gadol v'nora mashkirim Yisrael, Uvtechinu mecha Yehuda veYisrael, Go aleinu Adonai, Tzvot Shemo Kedosh Yisrael, Baruch atah Adonai Gal Yisrael.
If you're still davening, please continue at your own pace. Some more people who I'm seeing for the first time this morning. So Shabbat Shalom to our dear Dvorah Kolker and to Gabriela Litov and Eli, who I imagine is there as well. Those are the new faces on my screen that I hadn't seen before. Welcome, welcome, welcome. If you're done davening the Amidah, please be seated. We're about to be reading from Parshat Vayikra. And in a moment, we're going to have Debbie Mishek unmute and say the bracha before the Torah reading and have her read the Aliyot. But first, I want to focus in on what we're about to do. As I mentioned in my Shabbat teaching this past Shabbat afternoon, there's always a little bit of rabbinic trepidation when the book of Shemot ends and we're like, oh no, it's Vayikra again. And you're not supposed to say that because every verse has divine sanctity embedded within it. But sometimes it's harder to extract modern meaning from this section of the Torah. And one of the things that I ask myself when I come upon Vayikra every year is, in the most broadest sense possible, right, without focusing on the details, what's it about? Why does this book of the Torah exist? Aside from communicating the particulars of the ancient sacrificial ritual, which is clearly one of its raison d'etres, why is it there? And what was a Jew supposed to be pulling out of it, like of the matrix, beyond the specifics of the details? As many of you know, the prayer world that we have inherited, that we are doing right now, extends from the sacrificial system, right? So when the temple was destroyed not once but twice, and the rabbis, in a tremendous intellectual and spiritual revolution, essentially grafted onto the spoken word so much of what was originally attributed to the sacrificial act, and we got prayer in the absence of a centralized worship place in the temple. And so therefore, prayer became our language of worship to God, whereas beforehand, the language of our worship for God were these sacrifices that we're about to read. Now let's focus on something that we know about prayer and see if we can work backwards to sacrifices. One of the things that we know about prayer in the modern and even in the pre-modern Jewish world is that there is a tension. There's a tension in prayer. There are many tensions in prayer, right? There's a tension in prayer between, the fixed and the spontaneous. There's a tension in prayer between the individual and the public. There's also a tension, I would say, between precision, right? The expectation that the Jew, and certainly the Jew leading, get everything right? And have fluency, and that these are not suggested words; these are required words. That's one part of the tension. And the other part of the tension is the notion represented by that wonderful Hasidic story about the boy who only knows the alphabet and goes out into the woods. And there are many versions of the story. And the local Hasidim are very upset that he doesn't know how to daven. And the Rebbe says he knows the letters. He'll say the letters. God will weave them all together. And what matters is the prayer in your heart. That's a tension. Both matter in the Jewish prayer experience. Another way of articulating the tension is the tension between aesthetics and ethics. Aesthetics, how the prayer experience feels. We want it to be uplifted. We want it to be musically sound, right? We want it to have the harmonies to impact. And we want the person who's coming to services expecting the Torah reading and the Haftarah and the brachot to be intoned properly from the bima should get that. That's the aesthetics. That matters. And the ethics. The ethics suggesting what? Is someone who doesn't have the same appreciation or even ability to produce music in the right tone somehow less of a valued prayer, worshiper? That doesn't seem very ethical, right? And if someone who is, working really hard in order to produce Torah reading or haftarah or even public prayer with the right precision, but because of any number of things, didn't have the same education, didn't have the same, ability to produce those sounds, can't do it on the spiritual aesthetic level. Does that mean that that person doesn't have an opportunity to lead the community in prayer? These are tensions. I'm not suggesting which way the seesaw balances. I'm suggesting that both are present in our modern and pre-modern prayer experience. And with that in mind, I want to show you something about that is present in the sacrificial system as well. And it may be that one of the things that we're looking at right now informed the inherited tensions in prayer. Open up your Chumashim. If you have the Eitz Chaim Chumash, it's on page 595. If you just have a Chumash, it's Leviticus Vayikra chapter 4, verse 2. It's from the 5th aliyah of the Parsha. And what do we got here? Vaydaber Adonai Moshe lemor, God said to Moshe, saying, Daber al b'nei Israel, speak to the children of Israel, lemor, saying, Nefesh, a person, ki techata, who sins, bishkaga, by accident. And by accident always means one of two things in Jewish law. Either you didn't know you were doing the prohibited act, or you didn't know the act was prohibited. Right? Those are two different ways that one can do something by accident, right? Like you knew that this particular food was chametz, but you ate it by accident, or you ate it intentionally, you just didn't know it was chametz. If a Pesach example. What's going on in the verse? Mikol mitzvot Adonai, from all of God's mitzvot, asher lo te'asena, interesting parenthetical phrase, which ought not be done. The whole concept is that if you've done something that you shouldn't have done, then it ought not have been done, so it's somewhat redundant. Ve'asa, and now yet another potentially redundant three-word phrase, and did, me'achat mehena. It's translated in the Eitz Chaim Chumash as and does one of them. Me achat mehena. Achat means one. Meh means from. And hena, these. From one, from these. It doesn't translate perfectly into English. What you can notice in the Hebrew is that there are two froms, two mems, two limitings that are taking place in this phrase, which in and of itself is extraneous. Right? Because we already have named the fact that we're talking about someone who committed an unintentional sin. The Netziv, Rabbi Naftali Tzvi Yehuda Berlin, who was a wonderful and important Rosh Hashiva and religious thinker and writer in the late 19th, early 20th century, in his commentary on the Torah called the Ha'amek Davar, says what's going on here. He says some mitzvot have many, many details attached to them, right? And so you go to the level of mitzvah, and then the halachot on those on that mitzvah, and then like sub-halachot. So resting on Shabbat is a mitzvah. One of the categories of resting on Shabbat is not cooking. And then there are manifold micro things that you can't do in the name of observing the halacha of not cooking of the mitzvah of Shabbat, right? I mentioned sometimes, how you make tea on Shabbat is a micro subcategory of observing the prohibition of not cooking on Shabbat, which is of itself in the larger category of resting on Shabbat. And then Netziv says there are also certain mitzvot where there's just kind of one thing you're not supposed to do, right? He mentions, interestingly, in this commentary, the sexual prohibitions in later on the book of Vayikra. The thing you're not supposed to do is have relations with that person. That's it. There aren't that many subcategories of that. And he says what's going on in the verse is the me'achat mehena is equalizing those two categories. Whether you do one of those things where the one is the thing itself, or you do even one of the sub things where it's not that you're, when you make tea improperly, as it were, it's not that you're like violating all of the Sabbath. You haven't stopped resting on Shabbat, but you have violated one of the halachic particulars in a category which itself is a subcategory of the notion of resting on Shabbat. And the Netziv says this verse smushes them together. Whether you do of one of those things, which is the thing, or you do of one of those things, which is a sub-thing of a sub-thing, suggesting that the sacrificial system was there to represent your transgressing God's expectations, whether you transgress all of it in one form or just a minor piece of it. And it's interesting that in that verse, that really raises the stakes of your ritual sins. A minor thing is considered a violation of Shabbat. A tremendous stringency there is also the verse that talks about the fact that if you do something bishkaga by accident, you have recourse. You're not tarred and feathered. You're not kicked out of the community. Here's a sacrifice. You've broken something in the system. The fabric is torn. Repair it by offering the sacrifice and you're back in. So if you combine those two things together, talking about that tension, there are expectations in the sacrifices, in the observance of Judaism, and in prayer of precision and accuracy and paying attention to details. And even one aspect of one part of every mitzvah is a major violation, and intention matters. And if you weren't trying to offend God, or if I bring it into the relational, you weren't trying to offend another person, then our reaction to that is very, very different. Something which I think our society sometimes forgets. We have forgotten a little bit about how to assess the intention of a person's act because we're so quick to pounce on the word or the deed which may offend certain part of our sensitivities. So I love the Netziv's read because he is highlighting that the individual moments and details matter. Of course they do in our relationship with God. Of course they do in our relationship with each other. If it's all just kind of mealy-mouthed, banal commitment, then there's no structure, no system, nothing connecting us to one another. So it matters. And there's forgiveness. And there's space to build back trust. And there's an understanding that we're not perfect. And that if we err, whether we err in one of those details that matters because it's the entire category, or one of those details that's a subcategory of a subcategory, there is a pathway back. So I want to suggest to you that that's one of the things that Vayikra is about. And as we read now through these somewhat inscrutable verses, think of it as a system, an ancient and venerable and wise system to raise the level of our behavior that we're focusing on details and recognizing that our intention matters. And when we make a mistake, by mistake, God will take us back, and we should take each other back as well. That is an ageless piece of wisdom. Debbie, if you'll please be unmuted and say the bracha beginning the Torah reading. Rabbi Schatz, do you have a page number?
I do. Page 592, we're beginning with chapter 3, verse 1, and Yasher Koach. And Debbie will be spotlit as well, so you don't need to see us anymore. There you go.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Amen.
ואם זבח של עמים קרבנו, אם מן הבקר הוא מקריב, אם זכר, אם נקבה, תמים יקריבנו. בפני אדוני ושמח ידו על ראש קרבנו, ושחטו פתח אוכל מועד, וזרקו בני אחרון הכהנים את הדם אל המזבח סביב, והקריב מזבח השלמים איש של אדוני את ההלב המכסה את הקרב ואת כהלב אשר על הקרב ואת שתי כליות ואת ההלב אשר עליהן אשר על הכסלים ואת היותרת הכבד על הכליות יסירנה, והקטירו אותו בני אחרון המזבח על העולה אשר על העצים אשר על האש, אישי ריח ניחוח לאדוני.
Second Aliyah, verse 6.
Page 594. ואם מן הצאן קרבנו לזבח שלמים לאדוני זכר או נקבה תמים יקרבנו, ואם כסף הוא מקריב את קרבנו והקריב אותו לפני אדוני ושמח את ידו על ראש קרבנו ושחט אותו לפני אוהל מועד וזרקו בני אחרון את דמו אל המזבח סביב והקריב מזבח השלמים אשר לאדוני אל בו העלייה תמימה לעומת העצה יסירנה ואת החלב המכסה את הקרב ואת כל ההלב אשר על הקרב ואת שתי הכליות ואת ההלב אשר עליהן אשר הכסלים ואת היותרת על הקבר על הכליות יסירנה והיא תירו הכהן המזבח לחם של אדוני.
Third Aliyah, verse 12.
Page 594. ואם עז קרבנו והקריבו לפני אדוני ושמח את ידו על ראשו ושחט אותו לפני אוהל מועד וזרקו בני אחרון את דמו אל המזבח סביב והקריב ממנו קרבנו של אדוני ואת ההלב המכסה את הקרב ואת כל ההלב אשר על הקרב ואת שתי הכליות ואת ההלב אשר עליהן אשר על הכסלים ואת היותרת על הכבד על הכליות יסירנה והקטיר רם הכהן המזבח לחם אישה לריח ניחוח כהלב לאדוני חוקת עולם לדורותיכם בכל מושבותיכם כהלב וכל דם ולא תאכלו.
Fourth Aliyah, beginning of chapter 4, page 595.
וידבר אדוני אל משה לאמור, דבר אל בני ישראל לאמור, נפש כי תחטא ושגגה מכל מצוות אדוני אשר לא תעשנה ועשה מאחת מכינה עם הכהן המשיח יחטא לאשמת העם והקריב על חטאתו אשר חטא פר בן בקר תמים לאדוני לחטאת והביא את הפר אל פתח אוהל מועד לפני אדוני ושמח את ידו על ראש הפר ושחט את הפר לפני אדוני ולקח הכהן המשיח מדם הפר והביא אותו אל אוהל מועד וטבל הכהן את אצבעו בדם והכניסה מן הדם 7 פעמים לפני אדוני את פני פרוכת הקודש ונתן הכהן מן הדם על קרנות מזבח קטורת השמים לפני אדוני אשר באוכל מועד ואת כל דם הפר ישפוך אל יסור מזבח העולם אשר פתח אוכל מועד.
Yasher Koach, Debbie, we will turn now back to the sanctuary where Rabbi Kligfeld will lead us in a Misha Berach.
Yes, we're going to do the Misha Berach. I also wanted, if Avi Peretz is still watching or listening, I want to tell him some good news and some bad news. The good news, Avi, is that the air conditioning is definitely working in this room. The bad news is that I have frostbite because it is so cold in here, and I'm so much so I think I'm adding my name to this Misha Berach list. So you and your team who've been working on the air conditioning, it is working, and can someone please turn it off? Misha Berach Avatenu Avram Yitzchak v'Yaakov Imotenu Sarivka Rachel Lehu Yivarech v'Yirapek Kol HaCholim v'Kol HaCholot B'Kila K'tosha Hazot Et Zahava Yafa Bat Esther V'Et Rivka Bat Pesha V'Et Leah Fredel Bat Bracha Kreindl V'Et Catherine Bat Sarah V'Et Stanley Great V'Et Rabbi Yaakov Baruch Ben Uri v'Chava V'Et Yosef Menachem Mendel Ben Gittel V'Et Yehuda Ben Abraham v'Sarah V'Et Fredel Bat Rachel V'Et Metuka Sarah Bat Shinel Golda V'Et Bela Esther Gittel Bat Fega V'Et Ben Sion Ben Gittel V'Et Eliyahu Ben Shina Shira V'Et Elena Kramer V'Et Yehudi Bat Lid Bat Sivya V'Et Aharon Avram Ben Adina V'Et Rivka Bat Nachama V'Et Hillel Ben Yaakov V'Et Cyril Chana Bat Sivya V'Et Risa Chana Bat Chasya Geula V'Et Avram Simcha Ben Abraham V'Sarah V'Et Sarah Cyril Bat Miriam V'Et Menachem Ben Lili V'Et Natan David Ben Baruch Umina V'Et Ruth Fredel Bat Mirol V'Et Yehuda Yisrael Ben Leah V'Et Shulamit Bat Miriam V'Et Yehudit bat Shulamit v'et Leib Yosef ben Sarah v'et Mordechai ben Esther v'et Yehudit Liba bat Fega v'et Chaim ben Sarah Leah v'et Marion bat Angelica v'et Maria Teresa Estrada v'et Yosef Alilach bat Miriam v'et Lucinda Carpi v'et Michael Koenko v'et Penina Drebin v'et Chana bat Rosia v'et Chana Leah bat Shmuel v'Rachel v'et David Folman v'et V'et kol hacholim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu Yimalei Rachamim Lahem Lachzikam L'Rapotam Yishlach Lahem Refuah Shlema Min HaShamayim Refuat HaNefesh Refuat HaGuf B'toch Shar HaCholim V'chazek Et Yidei Eskim B'tzorcheihem Shabbat Yimozog Refuah Krova Lavo Hashta B'Galav Izman Kariv V'nomar Amen. May the Holy One bring speedy and full recovery to all whose names we mentioned and to all who are in need of healing. And we say Amen.
Amen.
Amen. We'll continue now with the fifth Aliyah on page 597, chapter 4, verse 8, and Debbie can again be unmuted.
את כל הלב פר החטאת ירים ממנו את ההלב המכסה על הקרב ואת כל ההלב אשר על הקרב ואת שתי הכליות ואת ההלב אשר עליהן אשר על הכסלים ואת היותרת על הכבד על הכליות יסירנה כאשר יורם מישור זבח השלמים והקטירם הכהן על מזבח העולה ואת אור הפר ואת כל בשרו על ראשו ועל קרעיו וקרבו ופרשו והוציא את כל הפר אל מחוץ למחנה אל מקום טהור אל שפך הדשן ושרף אותו אל עצים באש על שפך הדשן יישרף.
Sixth Aliyah, verse 13, we're on the same page.
ואם כל עדת ישראל ישקעו ונעלם דבר מעיני הקהל ויעשו אחת מכל מצוות אדוני אשר לא תעשנה ויאשמו ונודעה החטאת אשר חטאו עליך והקריבו הקהל פר בין בקר לחטאת, והביאו אותו לפני אוהל מועד, ושמחו זקני העדה את ידיהם על ראש הפר לפני אדוני, ושחט את הפר ושחט את הפר לפני אדוני, והביא הכהן המשיח מדם הפר אל אוכל מועד, וטבע הכהן אצבעו מן הדם, והיזה 7 פעמים לפני אדוני את פני הפרוכת, ומן הדם ייתן על קרנות המזבח אשר לפני אדוני אשר באוהל מועד, ואת כל הדם ישפוך אל יסוד מזבח העולה אשר פתח אוהל מועד, ואת כל חלבו ירים ממנו, והקטיר המזבח ועשה לפר כאשר עשה לפר החטאת, כן יעשה לו, וכיפר עליכם הכהן ונסלח לכם. והוציא את הפר אל מחוץ למחנה, ושרף אותו כאשר שרף את הפר הראשון, חטאת הקהל הוא.
7th Aliyah, verse 22, bottom of page 598.
אשר נשיא יחטא ועשה עתת מכל מצוות אדוני אלוהיו, אשר לא תעשנה בשגגה והשם, או הודה אליו חטאתו אשר חטא בה, והביא את קרבנו שעיר עזים זכר תמים, ושמח ידו על ראש השעיר, ושחט אותו במקום אשר ישחט אל העולם לפני אדוני, חטאת הוא. ולקח הכהן מדם החטאת באצבעו, ונתן אל קרנות מזבח העולה, ואת דמו ישפוך אל יסוד מזבח העולם, ואת כל בו יקטיר המזבח כהלב זבח השלמים, והיפר עליו הכהן מחטאתו ונסלח לו.
Yasher Koach, Debbie, thank you for always adding your voice, whether in song or in Haftorah. Torah, also Haftorah. You've done Haftorah for us as well. But now we will turn to the Haftorah. Cantor Chorny will be reading for us, so Debbie can take a break and be unmuted and unspotlit. And the Haftorah will be found. This week I actually know the page. Last week was not as easy. Page 607, and Cantor Chorny. Oh, there you are. Great.
Amzu yatsarti li dehilati yasaperu veloti karata Yaakov yigata b'Yisrael lo heveti li sehulotecha uzvachecha lo chibadatani lo hevadticha b'mincha velo hugaticha bilvona lo kanita li v'kesef kanei v'chelev zvachecha lo hirvitani hevadtani v'chatotecha hukatani b'fonotecha anochi hu mochef eshaecha l'mani v'chatotecha lo heskor הזכירני, נשפך יחד, ספר אתה למען תצדק, אביך הראשון חטא, ומליצך פשעו בי, וחלל שרי קודש, ותנה לכרם יעקב וישראל לגידופים, ואת השם יעקב אהבתי, וישראל בחרתי בו, כה אמר אדוני יוסעך ויוצרך מבטן יצרך, אל תירא, אל תירא, עבדי יעקב וישורון בחרתי בו, כי עצת מים על צמאי ונוזלים על יבשה, צוק רוחי על זרעך וברכתי על צאצאיך, וצמחו בבנך הציר כעבדים, על יבלי מים, זה יאמר לאדוני אני וזה יקרא בשם יעקב, וזה יכתוב ידו לאדוני ובשם ישראל יכנה. כה אמר אדוני מלך ישראל וגואלו, אדוני צבאות, אני ראשון ואני אחרון, ומפלדי אין אלוהים, ומחמוני קרא ויגידך וירחך לי, משומי עם עולם ואותיות, ואשר תבונה יגידו למו, אל תפחדו ואל תיראו, הלא מאז השמעתיך והגדתי ואתם איתי, אהיה שלוח מבלעדי ואין צור בל ידעתי, יוצרי פסל כולם תוהו וחמודיהם בל יועילו, וידיהם המה יראו וידעו למען יבושו, מיצר אלו פסל נסך לבלתי הועיל, הן כל חבריו יבושו וחרשים המה מהדם, יתקבצו כולם יעמודו יפחדו יבושו יחד, חרש ברזל מצד ופעל בפחם ובמקבות יצרהו ויפעלהו בזרוע כוחו, גם רעי ואין כוח ולא שת המים, ויהב חרש עצים נתקיו, ויתרהו בסרד יעשהו במקצועות, ובמחוגה יתארהו ויעשהו כתבנית איש, כתפארת אדם לשבת בית, לפרט לו ארזים, ויקח תרזה לאלון, ויאמץ לו בצי יער, נטעורן וגשם יגדל, ויעלה אדם לבאר, ויקח מהם ויחם, אף ישיג ואף הלחם, אף יפעל אל וישחו, עשהו פסל ויסגד למו, חציו שרף האיש, על חציו בשר יאכל, יצלה צליף ויסבב יחום, ויאמר יח חמותי ראיתי הור, ושאריתו לאל עשה לפסלו, יסגד לו וישחו, ויתפלל אליו ויאמר חצילני, כי אלי אתה, לא ידעו ולא יבינו, כי תח מראות עיניהם מהשכיל ליבותם, ולא ישיב אל ליבו, ולא דעת ולא תבונה לאמור, חטאו שרפתי במואש, ואף עפיתי על גחליו לחם, אצל בשר ואוכל, ויתרום לתועבה אסד לבול עצת קוד, רואה הפר לב הוטל היטהו, ולא יציל את נפשו ולא יאמר הלא שקר במיני, זכור אלה יעקב וישראל כי עבדי אתה, יצרתיך עבד לי אתה, ישראל לא תנשני, מחריתיך אב פשעיך וכענן חטאותיך, שובה אלי כי גאלתיך. רננו שמיים כי עשה אדוני, אריהו תחתיות ארץ פיצחו ערים רינה, יער וכל עץ בו כי גאל אדוני יעקב ולישראל יתברך.
יישר כוח.
Turn back to our Sidurim now. Rabbi Schatz, should we do prayer for our country next?
Yeah, page 177, page 148, or page 414.
Our God and God of our ancestors, with mercy, accept our prayer on behalf of our country and its government. Pour out your blessing upon this land, upon its inhabitants, upon its leaders, its judges, officers, and officials who faithfully devote themselves to the needs of the public. Help them understand the rules of justice you've decreed so that peace and security, happiness and freedom will never depart from our land. Adonai, God, whose spirit is in all creatures, we pray that your spirit be awakened within all the inhabitants of our land. Uproot from our hearts hatred and malice, jealousy and strife. Plant love and companionship, peace and friendship among the many peoples and faiths who dwell in our nation. Grant us the knowledge to judge justly, the wisdom to act with compassion, and the understanding and courage to root out poverty from our land. May it be your will that our land be a blessing to all who dwell on earth, and may you cause our people to dwell in friendship and freedom. Speedily fulfill the vision of your prophets. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn more anymore, for all of them, from the least of them to the greatest, shall know me. And let us say, Amen.
Amen.
Top of the next page, Rabbi Schatz, you want to lead us in prayer for Israel?
Sure, I wanted to give you the opportunity. Were you going to share something in this slot, or do you want to do it later?
Right before prayer for peace.
Great, okay. Avinu shebashamayim, tzur Yisrael vegoalo, barech emedinat Yisrael, reshit smichat geulatenu. Hagen aleha be'evrat chastecha, ufros aleha sukat shlomecha, ushlach orcha v'mitcha lerasheha, sareha ve'yotzeha, v'taknem beitzah tova milfanecha, chazek et idei migne eretz kodshenu, v'anchilem Eloheinu Yeshua, v'ateret nitzachon ta'atrem, v'natata shalom ba'aretz, v'simchat olam leyoshveha, v'nomar Amen.
Amen. I wanted to share something before a prayer for peace. On March 16th, an armed gunman killed 8 people at multiple massage parlors and spas around Atlanta. And while the motive is not fully clear, it's likely the suspect targeted women of Asian descent in a mass shooting spree. As we're taught in Leviticus 19:16, Lo ta'amod al dam re'echa, do not stand idly by the blood of your neighbor. Our thoughts and prayers go out to all members of the Asian American Pacific Islander community, to their families and their friends and their loved ones. May the memories of those who were killed be a blessing as we work together to end racism and hate and violence. My dear colleague with whom I shared treasured time in rabbinical school, Rabbi Mira Rivera, who's a Filipino-American rabbi at Romamu with Rabbi David Ingber in New York, wrote beautifully about the pain of this moment for Asian Jews and for all who are weary of praying for peace. Weary colleagues in Jewish community ask if they really have to champion everyone under attack. They say, we have been asked to show up for Black and brown communities, and now Asians too? We too are weary, those of us who have Asian heritage woven into our Jewish identities. We show up and say the same to Philot, shelter us in your embrace of peace. Rescue us from the hand of every foe, ambush along the way, and from all manner of punishments that assemble to come to earth. Those prayers hammer on the tender gold of our bodies and the menorah of the Judaism that we hold to so dearly. Selective silence is loud. To my weary colleagues who ask if they really have to champion Asian Americans who are under attack in this ongoing anti-immigrant hostility in our country, the answer is yes. The rabbis taught one supports the poor of the Gentiles as one does the poor of Israel. One visits the sick among the Gentiles as one does the sick of Israel. One mourns and buries the dead of the Gentiles as one does the dead of Israel. One comforts the mourners among the Gentiles as one does those in Israel, for the sake of peace. And now a prayer for peace. May we see the day when war and bloodshed cease, when a great peace will embrace the whole world.
Then nation will not threaten nation, and the human family will not again know war.
For all who live on earth shall realize we have not come into being to hate or to destroy. We have come into being to praise, to labor, and to love.
Compassionate God, bless the leaders of all nations with the power of compassion.
Fulfill the promise conveyed in Scripture. I will bring peace to the land, and you shall lie down, and no one shall terrify you.
I will rid the land of vicious beasts, and it shall not be ravaged by war.
Let justice and righteousness flow like a mighty stream, let God's peace Fill the earth as the waters fill the sea, and let us say,
Amen.
Rabbi Schatz, what shall we do?
Go ahead, teach some Torah.
Okay, I'll teach a little Torah, and then we'll end. A very little bit of Torah. Rabbi Kligfeld did a wonderful job of teaching the verse already that I'm going to teach on, so it saved me some time, which is great. So I'm going to teach on the same verse he taught on. You can open up the Chumash again if it's helpful to you. It's chapter 4 of Vayikra, verse 2. Daber el b'nei Yisrael lemor nefesh, ki techeta bishgaga. The soul, the person who sinned in error, mikol mitzvot Adonai, from all of the commandments of God. I'm going to stop there at that phrase and just teach on that phrase. The phrase is funny, it's tricky, and it triggers commentary because it seems to be missing perhaps a pronoun, a subject of that particular clause. Mikol mitzvot Adonai. Achat mikol mitzvot Adonai. We get two me'achat in the latter phrase, right? Ve'asa me'achat me'hena. But in that phrase, what mikol? There's a collection of Musar teachings, the Shnei Luchot HaBrit, and they bring two teachings that match one another. One from Midrash Tanhuma, a much older teaching, and one from Yalkut Shimoni. Again, they match, and they teach the same thing on this verse. What they say is that this verse teaches us that the transgression of any prohibition, even in error, is the transgression of all prohibitions, all lo tases. There are two types of mitzvot in the Torah. The ones that you need to do, and the ones that you need not do. Now, it teaches us this based on this mikol, right? Why would it use mikol, not it transgressed? One, there's so much language the Torah could have used, but the Torah used mikol mitzvot Adonai, and from that language we learn that if they transgressed mikol, it's as if they transgressed kol, and they use a proof verse from Bamidbar. The proof verse is, if you want to look it up, and I'll post this later on the podcast as well. It's from Bamidbar, and it's 15th chapter, 22nd verse. They use this proof verse, and they say it's as if you've transgressed all of the mitzvot in the Torah. And they say the system is set up thus. The reason why it works this way is because we also have a teaching in our tradition that if you complete one mitzvah, it's as if you've completed all the mitzvot in the Torah. So here's what I'm here to teach you in my very, very brief vortlach today. I think that the Musar teaching here that the Shnei Luchot HaBrit is trying to offer us is that is a very vulnerable, fragile system to set up. Don't base your life on the idea that if you err once, that you've broken all of the Torah, that you've broken down in your observance. Don't base your life that you've broken a relationship if you mess up once. And don't think that if you've done one good thing, that you can stop there. Don't think that one mitzvah gets you all the way. It's an ongoing system of action to be fulfilled over and over again. And I'll leave it there, and I'll toss it off to Rabbi Schatz.
Yasher Koach. I'm going to be even briefer, and I'm going to say that not that there's a competition. We chose these verses. Unfortunately, we found out that Rabbi Ingber wasn't going to be joining us yesterday at a certain point, and so we put together these teachings kind of in our last moments before Shabbat. And we chose the teachings that Rabbi Shapiro and I taught on in our Parsha class yesterday. So if you would like more on these verses, feel free to listen to the podcast. And I'm just going to say two quick sentences, and I taught this exact thing yesterday in the class, but I want to leave you with this. One of the questions that I had, and that it seems many of our rabbis had, about chapter 4, verse 3 is, why is it so important to the Torah that the high priest be the one who is incurring guilt in front of all of us? Why not choose a random person? Why choose someone who has so much power, who's a leader to the people? And what I found so compelling in Sforno's commentary is that the high priest potentially is the least likely to commit a sin. However, the high priest is also affected by the people around him in this case. A leader is affected by the people around her and is affected by that which the people need, that which the people want. And sometimes that means that we get to create beautiful things, and sometimes that means that we make mistakes because we are taking, hopefully, we are leading from within as opposed to from above. We are listening to the people around us. We're taking that which our community needs, that which our people are asking for, and we act. And the Talmud speaks of this in the way of a shaliach tzibor, in the way of a Schatz. That if you make a mistake in your own prayer, you then have what they call a bad omen in brachot. But if the shaliach tzibor, if the Schatz, the person who is doing the praying on your behalf, makes an error, not only that person, but all those who offered their prayer in response to or with the shaliach tzibor suffers the consequences. So I don't want you to hear this as a negative. I want you to hear this as a positive, that those who you are in community with and those who you call your leaders, whether spiritually or out in the world, we are affected by that which our people need and want. And I hope that every Shabbat you feel that we are very aware of the community that we are blessed to be part of. And so sometimes we try things out that you're not going to potentially like, or sometimes we try things out that you really love. But we, as the people who are in this moment lucky enough to lead a community, take risks. And as the Torah teaches us, sometimes that means that we also incur the guilt. But it's a blessing to be in community with you and to be leaders amongst you. And with that, we will turn to Rabbi Klickfeld to lead us in the end of Musaf.
And I'll be even briefer in contradistinction to how I was before, which was at great length. Please rise for Kiddush. And by that I mean we're going to be doing, encouraging you as we normally do as we get to 12 to do Musaf on your own, because even if we were to do it together, it would just be our silently doing it together. Musaf can be found on page 185 in the Lev Shalom, 156 in the Slim Shalom, 430 in the Sim Shalom.
Should we do Mourner's Kaddish before Kiddush?
We absolutely should.
Okay.
So thank you for that reminder. So let's move to 207, 184, or 512 for a recitation of the Mourner's Kaddish, and then we'll move to Kiddush.
Go ahead.
Please, Rabbi Schatz.
Gadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah.
Amen.
Be'alma divra chirutei ve'amlich malchutei b'chayechon u'v'yomechon u'v'chayei dechol beit Israel ba'agala u'vizman kari ve'imru Amen.
Amen.
Yehi shemei Rabbah v'barach le'olam l'omei omaya. Yit barach ve'yishtabach ve'yit pa'ar ve'yit romam ve'yit naseh ve'yit hadar ve'yit aleh ve'yit halal shemei dekudesha b'richu le'ela min kol birchata ve'shirata tush bechata ve'nechemata da'amiran be'alma ve'imru Amen. Yehi shalama rabba min shemaya ve'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'imru Amen.
Amen.
Oseh shalom b'romav Hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Israel ve'imru Amen.
Amen. And after we do Kiddush, again, you can do Musaf on your own, and we'll gather again tonight for Mincha. Since we changed the clocks, Mincha is like 10:30 p.m. or tonight or something like that.
6:40.
Same thing. And then if those who want to join us after Shabbat for zooming out of Shabbat. And And again, check your emails for all things regarding Pesach coming up this coming week, because try as we might, we have been unsuccessful at delaying or canceling it. So Pesach will be coming in 1 week from tonight. Please rise for Kiddush. חמתך ובנתך ובקרך ובשיר שירך כי ששת ימים עשה אדוני את השמיים ואת הארץ ואת הים וכל אשר בם וינח ביום השביעי כי מרח אדוני את יום השבת ויקדשהו סברי מרנן רבנן ורבותיי
לחיים.
ברוך אתה אדוני מכל העם בורא פרי הגפן.
Amen. Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom, everyone. We miss you. We love you. Look forward to seeing you soon.